Now let me talk about Django. So Django basically is nothing but open source. I should probably start with this. Django is a free open source library which is written in Python, and it is called as a high-level Python web framework, and it's called as a full stack web framework as well. And it allows us to develop very neat APIs, I mean HTML templates and all that. Using those templates, we will be able to create very nice views for your code. It basically works as a backend server-side web framework. And the REST framework basically allows us to create the endpoints. Whatever is your functionality for your machine learning models, we try to create the endpoints for that. Right, and especially when you have very large applications, which also has database connectivity, authentications, these kind of complexity comes, user validations and all that, right? So in such cases, having Django would be preferred. All these three that we speak about, the frameworks, Django, then we talk about Flask, then we talk about FastAPI. These are the popular three Python web frameworks, which allow us to develop the HTML templates or HTML pages, you can say. Each one of it has its own advantages and disadvantages, right? Now we need to try and learn the concepts of Django. So Django, what is Django? Django is simply a Python library, which is written in Python, which allows us to generate a REST framework, right? Basically an endpoint, HTML view for the code. Django is said to contain MVT design pattern. What does M, V, and T means? M means model, V means view, T means template. What does these MVT actually mean? So if you talk about MVT, M stands for model, right? Now, what does this model mean? Model basically is trying to give data to the end users, I mean to the models basically, right? So when we talk about model, it allows us, right? It basically allows us to deliver or provide data. That's important. All right. So model, nothing but it provides us data. The data, generally, when we speak about data, the data sources could be anything. So when your model has to connect, when your HTML APIs and all those things will have to connect, your application has to connect to database, there would be integrations, right, from the front end to back end. There could be a lot of complexities with respect to that, and different tools could be there, different programming languages could be there. So interaction becomes difficult. Now Django, right, is using something called as ORM, Object Relational Mapping. And this is a technique which enables the users to write whatever the connectivity code that is required without using complex SQL statements or any other statements that we basically require. Any language that is required for connectivity to your data sources, right? It helps the users to very easily get the connectivity of the data. That's the logic. Now, there are certain standard files that we have, all right? That files are basically templatized. So when you want to generate Django application, There will be some static files that are created. We will be discussing about those files also. The data related, right, the models that we are speaking about, the file which is used to design or define these models or data sources is models.py. This is a standard file. So as soon as you define your application, the standard template files are available. We'll take these files and then make changes. So if you want to connect with databases, this is the file that we use. There are certain questions. I think there's some lag in the sessions. Pretty simple solution. I mean, simple answer to the question. The question is, can we deploy over Docker also? Now, as I explained to you all, let me put it again. When you are trying to deploy, we will be deploying ML code, but you cannot just give an ML code. So what you do, you give HTML pages. So this is the code which is written so that you give a UI front end to the users. This entire code will be placed in a server. This server can be a local server, can be a cloud server. The Docker basically is nothing but a containerization concept, sir. It creates a container. These containers can run on local, these containers can run on cloud as well. So to answer your question, yes, it can also be implemented on Docker. Next, moving on. So models is something that we discussed. Now let's move on to view. A view is basically nothing but the front end. It is basically your code, as you can see, right? It's nothing but view is nothing but the code which allows us to design how the UI should look like. Right? Very simple. You write your code. In Flask, we used app.py, if you remember, which contains all the content, the code that is required, and it redirects to HTML, isn't it? View is exactly that code in Django. So you write your basic UI related code, your actual code, which basically redirects or pulls the HTML code from templates folder. So this is where you write views.py is the file which you use to write your code. And this basically is nothing but takes your HTTP request. I mean, this is where you get the return, but in order to get the result, right, return result, you need to also pass the input. So you're basically creating that function logic which says, in this page, you're passing input. These are the various arguments that I read in. This is the backend model that I'm going to use. And this is the result that I'm getting. And that result will be again passed back to the user in a UI. So this is the logic that you're going to write with respect to your entire code. So this is what an end user will experience, right? But when you say, hey, this is the result that you're getting, or there is some input that you're going to read, user has to pass things, right? So you need to give the UI by connecting the code to templates. Template is basically nothing but a folder which contains the HTML files. In Flask, we use the same standard. We will have templates folder itself. Simple. So you'll have templates folder. We will pass the code, the index.html or home.html, whatever name you want to get, or the results.html. and you design the layout, HTML layout. And these HTML layouts can be anything. And there are a lot of readily available templates. You can, in fact, use the same HTML code, the files that you have used in Flask in Django as well. Same HTML codes can be used. There's no difference to the HTML part. So we will create a folder called templates. And within the templates, we will have our HTML files. Right? And we also have the standard templates. And in Django, the additional benefit that we have is it allows us to add tags, Django tags. This is a additional benefit, of course, it's something that you can take. So what I'll do is I'll simply take the HTML files that I have created for my machine learning model in the previous sessions that I have displayed, Flask code, for example. I'll take the same files here. So it becomes very easy, right? HTML part is very easy, friends. Don't worry on that. Now, how do we install? Installation is very simple. For installing Django application, we will simply say pip install Django. That's all. Remember, it is a Python's web framework library. It's as simple as you simply say pip install. That's all. Now, what happens is once this command is created, once the pip install is done, you import Django, and then you can start running your programs. But when you do, you need to ensure that you are in a directory where all your code files are there. Okay, so that also something that we will see. We will need to initialize the application by saying this. All right, Django admin, start project, whatever the project name that you want to give. And this will ensure that you get all the template files that are required. So this is going to create a folder with this name. This becomes your root directory. And within the root directory, these are all the files. So this is the parent directory, or you can say this is the root directory. And within this directory, you will have manage.py and a folder with the app name that you have given. Within the app, you will have these different files. Views.api, views.py will also be there. That is something which is we create for customized functionalities. We add that. But these are the default files which we get. Now, what does each of these file means? Let's try and understand. The first folder at the high level is basically our root directory. And this is basically your container. You can say it is like your project name. Okay, main directory. Within the directory, we have two entities created. The first file is manage.py. And this file is very important for us to understand. So manage.py is basically a file. You can say it is a command line utility, which allows us to interact with the Django project that we are trying to create. This is like your, I should say, connection, right? This is where you are connecting to your Django project. Next. We have another file which is created within this main directory, right? Now, this is the folder name. So you'll have the app name, yeah, which is generally the same name as the root directory. So this file, this folder is containing all the files, templates that are required. Basically, everything is there inside this folder. Every Django project that we are generating or creating is a Python package, right? It becomes like a Python package first. All right. Now, in this Python package, we will have all the required files. The first file is init.py. We have seen this, right? Init.py. Now, in init.py, it's basically an empty file. It has nothing. Okay. In the init.py file, you'll have empty content, but this is going to define that particular folder as a package. It basically considers a Python package if you have that initialization file. Next, we will have the settings.py, and all the settings that basically we want to do will be done in the settings.py file. Settings. Any configurations that we want to customize that we want, right? Customization that we want will be done in the settings.py file. Next, urls.py. This is another interesting file that we will have. URL declarations, any URLs that you want to basically try and connect. So you will have the urls.py standard file. Within this file, you can give the URLs. URLs could be your entire folder structure. Then comes your ASGI file and WSGI file. ASGI stands for Asynchronous Server Gateway Interface. WSGI contains or is called as Web Server Gateway Interface. Flask works on WSGI interface, okay, the standards. When we are trying to work with the web frameworks, they need to have connectivity, right? They work as an API, isn't it? So web frameworks were basically web server was used initially. Flask also works on WSGI, but it has certain challenges. So ASGI comes into picture. It is running in an asynchronous way. Asynchronous means it also waits for getting connectivity. It can have parallel connections, and all those things are there. There are benefits with respect to this gateway interface. We're not discussing about these two anyways. We're not going in details of that. But Django can handle both the standards, ASGI standard or WSGI standards. Right, so that is the benefit. Then we also have, as I said, views.py file, right? Yeah, so views.py file is a very important file which basically have all the content that is written. But it is not readily available. It is not given ready. Okay. You will have to construct that. I will show what will be there in the views.py file also. So basically, whatever the web pages that we are constructing, right, is basically connected to this. So your HTML pages will be connected to views, and this logic or code will define the entire flow of your user experience you get, right? And as I said, it takes the inputs. We will have the code written in such a way that it reads the inputs. It connects to the ML engine, for example, in our case, the application, gets the processed results and returns that result on HTTP or HTTPS interface. This is where your data flows. So views.py, that's the file that we need to actually work. Then this is this is basically what happens. So Django works on 8000 as a standard template port. This is for your local host. And this is the port. You can basically, if you are using Heroku, then you'll have the standard template. Standard application name there, .heroku.com. But if I'm deploying it on localhost, this is basically the UI. So when you execute your Django application, it gives the URL, right? And when you launch the URL, it goes to this urls.py file, and then it calls the view, right? It understands what is the logic. In your views.py, you have defined the flow, right? So it connects to that particular view, which is available in views.py file. And here, we'll take input here over HTTP. Thanks to URLs, it connects to us, locates us to the views.py file. This views.py file will have all the details, including once the input has come in, what is the ML engine that we need to work with. You can say this is nothing but your saved model, saved ML model. You could save the model in pickle or job file, joblib. Either way, it takes those saved models. So you're going to define those saved models here, right? And these relevant models will also take the data if required, and that is defined in models.py. The view then basically routes, right? The views.py file has the HTML view also, right? So it redirects to templates folder, where you probably will have the UI. And the template folder contains the HTML and code, basically. And this finished HTML is shown on the browser, the web browser that you basically have. So when you're launching the URL on the browser, this is the flow that happens, and the user will be able to experience the UI HTML view on the browser. In the backend, this is the flow that happens. So URLs, views, models, template. Within the templates, you'll have .html files. So these are the sequence of actions that are happening in the Django framework in the backend.